What's up, guys? Pete, you got your own row? Just Pete's row. All right. Well, you guys enjoying the weather right now? No. Hold up. Last week I was in Iceland. In Iceland, the top temperature, like year-round, is 59. And when we were there, it was like 52 and sunny one day. And we were like, this is great. And then I got here and I'm like, this is so much better. So you guys should enjoy what you have because this is way better than whatever Iceland has. I mean, like they were calling for, some of the days were like 46 and rainy. Like I had to buy waterproof boots and waterproof pants and a waterproof jacket. And my sister was like, you don't have that stuff? I'm like, no, if it rains in Michigan, we just don't go outside because it'll be sunny the next day, right? Like who goes outside and plays in the rain still to this day? When you were like 3, maybe you did. Is Jeremy raising his hand? I feel like Jeremy's the person who would play in the rain. I don't know, you just strike me as like a guy who would go out in the rain, you don't really care. But for the most part, this weather has been amazing, so you guys should keep enjoying it. I think this is our last Wednesday where it's gonna be 80 degrees for a long time. But I wanna get to the point of tonight, and that is talking about fear. Fear, and then the contrast to fear, which would be faith. How many of you guys would say you're afraid of something? Every single person should be in here with their hand up. I know all of you have fears of some sort. Probably every single person here has some kind of a social fear. How many of you guys would like to be doing what I'm doing right now up in front of everyone else? Okay, 1. There we go. The guy wearing the bow tie and the suit jacket, I believe you. My brother-in-law is, how old is John? 28, and I think he just learned how to call and order his own pizza like last year. Like he just does not he's afraid of talking on the phone. I remember Lindsay and I were dating and he'd be like 17 years old. I'm like, dude, call and order your pizza. He goes, will you do it? Like you drove here, like in your own car. What do you mean you're too afraid to do that? But like social fears are a thing I think that we have now in today's day and age, way more so than what they had in the 1800s or even biblical times, right? Like you guys don't want to get up and talk probably in your classes. You guys probably have to give speeches and no one wants to do that. I love giving speeches. I really did. Like in high school, if there was somebody who wanted to do the work and then I would just present it, that was the perfect deal. I never had to do any of the homework and then I would just do this part. It was great. But you guys have other fears in your life too. Whether you want to admit it, and I'm not talking fears, like I'm afraid of spiders. That is hands down my biggest fear in the world. You're laughing, and yet there might still be a flying spider that's poisonous. We don't know. So any of them could fly, so I stay away from them. All spiders. When Lindsay and I, we've been together for 16 years. I remember when we were dating, I think the first day I met her grandma. It was like a big family thing. And I was in the basement, and I heard her grandma say, Brennan, and I came upstairs and looked in there, and there was a big spider on the wall in the bathroom. And Lindsay and her mom knew that I was afraid, so they both looked at me and were like, what are you gonna do? And I just stared at it. It was like, I'm stuck. Like, do I show her grandma that I'm afraid of spiders, and then her grandma just knows me as like the wimpy guy for the rest of my life until she passes away someday, right? Or do I kill this spider and risk dying myself? Like, I don't know what, it was a lose-lose situation there, so luckily Lindsay's mom stepped in and killed that spider for me. So I didn't have to say no. But like, that's my thing. I don't like spiders. Some people don't they got a fear of heights. How many of you guys are afraid of heights? Right? You get up there and you get a little bit queasy. Maybe you're on top of a ladder. The ladder has a little bit of a shake, but you're the one shaking it. Like, no one else is shaking it. You're up there, you're like, it's your own fear that's doing this. Or how many of you guys are afraid to fly? You guys are afraid of planes? You guys ever been on a plane with turbulence? Turbulence is like when the whole plane shakes. All right, listen, I'm gonna tell you guys a quick story. Last Monday, Lindsay and I were flying to Iceland. And if you don't know, Iceland is like super far north. I mean, it's like almost the North Pole Arctic Circle. Well, in order to get there, you have to fly over all of Canada, over part of the Arctic Ocean, over Greenland, and then more ocean, and then you get to this little island, Iceland. Well, over top of Greenland, you hit turbulence. So I'm not afraid of flying. There's no spiders on the plane, so I'm good. So I'm on this plane, and like I'm too big for planes, if we're being completely honest. So I'm not very comfortable. I can't sit down. I'm like stuck. It's super hot on that plane. Like it was so bad. I was drenched through my shirt. Anyway, and then we hit this turbulence, and so the entire plane starts shaking. And you know it's bad when all that happens is it goes ding, and the buckle in your seatbelt light all the way down the plane goes on, right? Like no one says anything, no one comes on and goes, oh, don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna be fine. Like no, it just goes ding, buckle in. And then the flight attendants kind of jog past you and they go down and they buckle in too. And I'm like sitting there going, Well, that's not a good sign. Like, the middle-aged woman who just served me my Coke Zero is terrified in the back. Like, am I gonna die? Like, that's a thought that went through my head. And then you look out the window and you see the plane's wings. Like, these things are huge, but like those wings are flexing. And I'm like, this is it. That wing's gonna break off. We're gonna go plunging in and I'm gonna die in Greenland. Like, that's how my story ends, in a plane crash in Greenland. Okay, this is it. Anyway, long story short, we got over Greenland. It's all fine. I'm obviously here, so I didn't die. But a lot of people are afraid of flying. Some people would drive. I think, Michael, are you in that camp? You just love driving everywhere. Is that because of a fear for flying? I don't really know if it is or not. You'll do both. You just like driving. You're just a crazy person. Okay, there we go. Some people don't like flying, so they'll drive everywhere because they get afraid of the turbulence and they don't want to die in Greenland. But there are a lot of different things that cause a lot of different fears in all of us. And for us to triumph over those fears, it requires a certain level of faith that we're going to be okay. Now, that faith is different and looks different for every single person. Let's see, what's your name? Landon, are you afraid of spiders? No, you're not. So if there's a spider crawling right now, you just go step on it. It'd take no faith whatsoever. Me, I would have to dude, it'd be bad. You'd have to kill it for me. We're going to be completely honest here, right? The level of fear is where the faith comes in. He's not afraid, so I'm not going to say there's any faith needed for him to go kill that spider. He doesn't have any kind of internal turmoil that he has to work through and have faith on God in order to get past it. My mother-in-law is terrified of water. I know it sounds weird. She does not like water. She hates driving on cars over the bridge. Like, you go over the Mackinac Bridge, you better be in the they got the metal grates so you can look down and see her over top of water. She doesn't do that. I've sent her a video before of me going over it, and she got really mad. She doesn't like swimming. She doesn't like boats. So for her to get on a boat, which is funny because they own one, for her to get on their boat, it takes a lot of faith. Like, she has to have faith in that boat that it's not going to sink, because if it sinks, she doesn't know how to swim, and so she's going to die in Silver Lake. Like, that's what's going through her head. And she has to pray a lot in order to get on a boat in Silver Lake. How many of you guys would be like that, right? For most of us, we wouldn't be. You'd be like, oh, I'm going tubing. Like, some of you guys were stupid and just go tubing and flip around and crash, and you don't care. You got a life jacket on, you don't care. But I'm saying her fear is that, so it requires a lot more faith for her to get over that fear. Almost every single person here said they'd be too afraid to come up here and talk in front of everyone else. So if you were going to, not you, but everyone else, if you were going to, it would require a crazy amount of faith and reliance on God for you to come up here and talk in front of everyone else, right? Other people, not at all. This isn't a fear that some people have. It's not a thing they think about. They just get up there and they start talking, right? So you wouldn't say I've got faith in this because I've got to talk about this, so there's some faith because there's a little bit of fear. But if I was up here talking about Jeeps, there's no fear there. Are you kidding me? I'll talk about all the Jeeps. You guys want to talk about Jeeps? Let's do it. But there's no fear there, right? So there's no faith for me to get up here and talk in front of you guys about that. But there is going to be a faith for all of us to get over our own personal fears. Now, there's a story in the Bible of David. How many of you guys have heard of King David before? Okay, it's a little more than half. This side of the room's never heard of him. Let's go a little higher. How many of you guys have heard of David before? Okay, that's good. There we go. David and Goliath, you guys have probably all heard of that story. That story gets referenced more during football season than any other time of year, I bet. I mean, you watch any football, there's a big David and Goliath situation we got here. Alabama against the school of deaf and blind, or whatever the case is, right? They're going to talk about David and Goliath type situation. Isn't it? But when you have those situations, you have to pull reference from David and Goliath, and that is because of what David had to go through. But I'm going to explain that was not even the most scary situation that David faced. Goliath was a 9-foot, 10-foot tall monster of a man, and David was a little bitty, right, if you know the general concept of the story. But David was 15 years old when he was anointed by Samuel. I don't know how much you guys know about the story, but there was a king in Israel, King Saul. King Saul was in charge of everything, right? You guys know how kings work. You don't tell Saul what to do. He's a king. He can do whatever he wants, whatever. Samuel shows up one day and says, man, you screwed up. You screwed up. And it actually says in verse, 1 Samuel 13:14. Do you have that verse? But now your kingdom must end, for the Lord has sought out a man after his own heart. The Lord has already appointed him to be the leader of his people because you have not kept the Lord's command. Leave that up there for a minute, would you, Nick? That line says, for the Lord has sought out a man after his own heart. At that time, when that sentence was said or written down, David was like 14 or 15 years old. Like David was your age. He's being called a man after God's own heart at the age of 15. That is crazy. And along those same lines, everyone in here, I think, is probably sixth graders, might be 11 years old, and some of the seniors are probably 18. So you guys go from 11 to 18 years old. You're right there in that teenage wasteland. But that's where you guys exist. You guys are the same age as David is in this situation. But yet he's so faithful in his own life. He's so faithful to God that he's being referred to as a man after his own heart. His man after God's own heart. That is so crazy to me. Like, I'm 34, and I don't think that sentence would be said about me. Right? Like, I want it to be, and I'm going to strive for that to be the case, but like, especially when I was 15, are you kidding me? They'd be like, there's a guy who hasn't been arrested yet, hasn't been caught, right? Like that, I was an idiot when I was 15. I definitely was not a man after God's own heart at all. But at that same time, David was a shepherd. You guys know what a shepherd is? What? Okay, shepherd, someone who takes care of sheep. When I was in Iceland last week, the entire country is covered in horses and sheep. Everywhere you looked, horses and sheep. I didn't see a single animal other than those two. Like, I didn't see a squirrel. I didn't see a mosquito. All I saw was horses and sheep. Oddly enough, you eat both of them there. Like, you go to the grocery store and they had ground horse. It was weird. Ground horse right next to the turkey. Super lean. Lots of macros. Anyway, the point is, there was shepherds too. So you'd be driving along, be like, okay, giant volcano, crater, bunch of sheep. There's some rams, right? The sheep with the horns. And then there'd be a guy standing there in his Icelandic awesome sweater that I wanted to buy, and he's the one watching the sheep. That was his job. He didn't have a stick. I think they outgrew the stick, I'm going to be honest. They actually use drones a lot of times to herd the sheep, which is kind of cool. But long story short, the shepherd was in charge of the sheep. Make sure the sheep all stay here. If you lose a sheep, you got to go get it. There's a whole other story in the Bible about chasing a lamb up a mountain, burning bush, this whole thing. We'll get into that later. The point is, when you are watching the sheep, you are in charge of the sheep. If something tries to kill a sheep, because sheep taste good, you guys all had lamb chops, right? Other things want to eat the sheep. And back then, you had to deal with things like bears and lions. Can you imagine, who here is 15? Give me a 15-year-old. 15-year-old, okay, that whole row of girls are there is 15. Imagine you guys are out in a field by yourself. Hey, here's your 150 sheep you have to watch. And all of a sudden you look over and you're like, well, that's a lion. I'm not a lion. I don't have guns. Guns don't get invented for centuries later, right? You don't have a bow and arrow. It's you and your stick, 150 sheep, and there's a lion. Me, I'd be like, all right, Mr. Lion, have as many as you want, don't eat me. Like, that's where I would be. But that's not where David's at. David is going to go and fight the lion to protect the sheep. That is crazy town to me. I wouldn't go fight a house cat right now. Not because I'm afraid, that sounds stupid. I'm not gonna go fight an animal. But he goes and fights like two of the most dangerous animals ever. Like a lion and a bear. Like, can you imagine? Have you guys seen bear attack videos? Have you ever seen The Revenant? Don't watch it, it's rated R. But if you've ever YouTubed the fight, there's a scene where the bear, it's a true story, this bear comes and attacks this guy out in the middle of the woods, absolutely mauls him. I mean, like, they got razor sharp claws, teeth. It doesn't take very long at all, and the guy's like bleeding out everywhere. And then we got our little 15-year-old Jewish boy who's gonna go and fight this stupid thing. It's crazy. The entire story of David is nuts, especially when you put it in the context of he's your age. It's not like he's some 35-year-old physical specimen, right, who's walking around like I'm a big tough guy. No, he's a 15-year-old kid who has to go and fight these massive monsters of animals in order to protect the sheep. How many of you guys would be afraid if a lion walked in and you had to fight it? That should be every single hand in here, maybe two hands.
Wait, what?
Right. All of us would be afraid to fight a lion.
No.
Come on. You would be? You're lying and we're in church, so come on. the point is, I'd be afraid to fight a lion, a bear, a wolf, a dog. Like, I go through a whole long list of things I would not want to fight. I would give the sheep up 100%. But yet, he had complete faith that that's what he was supposed to do. He was put in that situation. God put him in charge of those sheep. He's got to protect the sheep. And he has faith that God is going to help him. Like, he knows he's a 15-year-old without a gun. He's not going to be able to beat a lion on his own accord. The only chance he has is by relying on God and having faith that God's going to help him do this. So that's one example of how David is overcoming some crazy fear opportunities in his own life. Then we get to David and Goliath, but just before that, there's a part when we were just reading it. Samuel goes and tells Saul, hey, you're done, you messed up, I got somebody else on the way. And then he has to go, God says, hey, go see Jesse, and you're going to go find the next king of Israel. So he gets to Jesse's house, and he sees, all right, that's a pretty good-looking brother right there. And then God's like, that's not the one. And he goes, well, that's another really good-looking brother right there. God goes, that's not the one. Did that like 7 times for like 7 perfect people that you would think, like they're probably tall, strong, handsome, warriors, whatever. And God kept on saying, that's not the one. And then he looks at Jesse and goes, do you have any other sons? Like, why would God send me here if none of these 7 are the ones? There must be something else going on. Jesse's like, I got one other one, but he's like 15 years old. He's out there watching some sheep, whatever. We just put him out there because he's in charge of, making sure no sheep die. He says, well, go get him. David shows up, and Jesse's like, I don't think this is actually how it happened. This is how I picture it happening. It was just like being from heaven. Like, this is the one, right? Like, right, exactly. You can hear the heavenly angels. That's actually not how it went. But that's how he goes, all right, this is the one. This is the guy. So he anoints David as the next king. Now, come with me on this. If you're Saul, you're the king, you're in charge, right? You're Saul. No one tells you what to do in the entire kingdom. Imagine, try and get yourself in that power mind right now. You are 100% in charge of everything. You want something, you tell them like that, it's done. No one gets to tell you what to do. And then this old man shows up and says, hey, by the way, you messed up and there's going to be a replacement. How mad would you be at that situation? I'd be furious because you don't tell me what to do. Like, who are you to tell me? Like, I could have you, like, your head chopped off. I don't care. I'm the king. So you got this king who, rightfully so, would be super angry and upset with the situation. And now you're a 15-year-old kid who gets anointed to be the next king. I would be so afraid of Saul if I was David in that situation. Like, that'd be more scary to me than fighting the lion and the bear. If I was a 15-year-old and you told me, oh, by the way, this king who's super angry and is going to lose his job, and you're the one who's going to replace him, I would be like, and time to go to Florida. Like, I'm not sticking around to see what this king's going to do to me. You better believe that. I'd be super scared of that situation. And yet David has faith, goes through the entire process, actually starts working directly for Saul. There's a whole crazy portion in there I'm not going to get into. You guys can talk to your own leaders about it. It says God would would allow an evil spirit to fall on top of Saul, and the only cure for that was David playing his harp. So like David had a very important role to Saul, which is crazy because, again, like I said, if I knew I was replacing this guy who has the power to kill me and no one could do anything about it, I would not want to be in that situation. That would make it super uncomfortable to be in those meetings or in that throne room or even existing in life in that area. Like, I would not want to do that at all. I actually had a situation at work years ago. They brought me in, Chrysler or Jeep, whatever. They said to my company, they said, hey, we need somebody to come over and who's good at Excel work, whatever. You guys pay attention in school. Excel will get you a lot of jobs if you know how to use it. Anyway, so I go over there. I'm like, all right, I'll do this. I don't know what I'm doing. I just know how to do Excel. And this lady they said I'm supposed to work with, she wouldn't tell me what I was supposed to do. They said, hey, this is Brenda, whatever. She's going to help you do your job. And I'm like, okay, so what do I do? And she would just completely ignore me. Like, at one point, it was me and her in this one meeting room, and she got up and walked out. And I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that situation. Like, what's going on? So I went and told the person who got me there, and she said, oh, she thinks you're going to take her job, so she doesn't like you. So that made every meeting super uncomfortable, as you could imagine. Like, this lady thinks I'm there to replace her. I don't know. I was just sent across the street to do some Excel work. I don't know what's going on. I was a stupid 26-year-old kid. So, long story short, I did end up taking her job. Did not mean to. Hear me out. Did not mean to. I was just better at Excel, so they got rid of her. But the point is, she did not like me at all because she thought I was there to take her job. Imagine if you were the king, how much you would despise the person who was brought in to replace you. I am honestly surprised Saul didn't just attempt every single day to kill him. Like, I would be super mad at that whole situation. And yet David, being a 15-year-old, 16-year-old kid at this time, was super faithful. Super faithful, had a ton of faith in God that he was going to be fine through that entire situation. God had a plan for him, and he was not being paralyzed by fear. I think a lot of us get paralyzed by fear in our own life a lot. We have, in our own personal lives, how many of you guys are afraid of the future, an unknown future? It gets worse the closer you get to graduating. I know, I'm sure the seniors in here, juniors, you guys get to a point where you're like, oh, I don't know what college I'm going to go to. And then you get to college and you're like, what major do I pick? Like, these are all like heavy things that you're like afraid to make the wrong choice, make the wrong decision, right? And then someday you're going to find yourself in a dating relationship and you go, is this the one? Like, I'm afraid, I don't want to make the wrong choice. You can get paralyzed sometimes. You'll be so afraid that you're going to make the wrong choice that you won't make any choice and you're just stuck and you just won't go anywhere. I've known a lot of people that are just stuck in life because they're too afraid to make a decision and move, or too afraid to even pray and find out what God wants them to do because they're too afraid of what the answer might be. Like, hey, what am I supposed to do with my life? Maybe God says, sell all of your stuff and move to South Africa. Well, that's a terrifying answer to hear, right? So some people don't ask the question because they're afraid that off chance of that possibility might actually happen, and they don't ask the question, right? How many of you guys are afraid of dying? How many of you guys are afraid to get sick someday? Watch, I'm going to give you guys so many new fears. The point is, a lot of people are afraid of diseases and afraid to get hurt, right? Like, oh, I don't go do that because I'm afraid I might crash my motorcycle and I might break my leg. Or, oh, some people don't ride motorcycles at all because they're afraid that other people are texting and they might die. Or maybe you're super, super afraid that you're going to get cancer someday. Like, these are all chances. I mean, we all know somebody in our life that's had some situation. But that's a real fear. Lindsay and I, both of our moms, within like 3 months of each other, I don't know how many years ago, like 2-3 years ago now, I think Lindsay's mom found out she had breast cancer, which was, I mean, you can imagine, like, you find out your mom or your mother-in-law, in my case, has breast cancer. Like, that's terrifying. And then, like, 3 months later, my mom calls me while I'm at work, and she's like, hey, I have breast cancer too. And we're like, are you kidding me right now? Which is Lindsay in here? No, perfect. Fair game. Lindsay is a very, very, very afraid person. It's just one of her struggles. She gets anxiety a lot. So Lindsay has always been afraid she's always afraid of getting sick someday, right? So then, as you can imagine, as somebody who's afraid of that, both of our moms get breast cancer at the same time. Lindsay's immediately going, oh my gosh, genetically, I've got it too. I'm going to die from this. I'm going to lose my mom. I'm going to lose my mother-in-law, and I'm going to lose myself. Like, Lindsay's just completely spiraling, right, from the fear that she has. But we're watching both of our moms go through this process. They were not like that at all. If I got diagnosed with cancer, I would be terrified. But that's because I'm not nearly as strong in my faith as both of our moms were. Those two women were super godly, super faithful, always optimistic. I don't know if it was just a show for us or if it was actually truly them. I hope, and I like to think that that's what it was. But they are both now completely, both breast-free and breast cancer-free. But they both had surgeries. They're both good now. It's fine. But they had faith through that entire situation that they were going to be fine because they had faith in God, right? Like them getting diagnosed, sitting there in that doctor's office, and you get not a text, but the doctor goes, yeah, we ran the test and you have breast cancer. That moment is their version of 15-year-old David looking over and seeing a lion with some sheep, right? Like, that's the moment, that's the fear. Are you going to get over it or are you not? What are you going to do? Are you going to let the sheep die to the lion? Are you going to completely fold and go, that's it, God's not real. I'm going to die from cancer, and I do not believe in God anymore because the worst case scenario happened. Like, those are the options you have. A lot of us have fear in our own life when it comes to when it comes to decisions on what we're going to do that could affect us long term in our life. And like I said, you can be afraid of who you're going to marry. You can be afraid of, I don't want to do this because I might get in a car accident or whatever the case is. This is a stupid example, but I'm going to give you a quick story about my life. When I was working for this other company back in the day, I worked for this company, and they sent me across the street to Chrysler. I did some work there. Chrysler really liked me, and they offered me a full-time position. I replaced Brenda. So I didn't mean to, but whatever. She got a different job. It was fine. She landed on her feet. Anyway, so they said, hey, it was a contract work. You guys don't really know what this means, but I worked for this company, but then they loaned me out to Chrysler, and I would do work for Chrysler, but I was not getting paid very much money at all. They would charge a lot of money to Chrysler for me, but then they just give me a little bit of it, and they were just making a ton of money, my other company. Well, one day Chrysler was like, hey, we want you to work directly for us. Leave your company, come work for us. You'll be a Chrysler employee. You can work in this giant building, health insurance. That building has dude, you guys, the Chrysler building has 3 Starbucks, a Dunkin' Donuts, a full track, a hospital. It has surgical wards, a gym, 2 haircut salons. This place is it's like a city inside. And I was like, I want to work here. This place is crazy. Look at this. I can get a haircut in 8 different places. So I'm like, shoot, I'll go work there. And they said, all right, so you have to go through this whole long process in order to get into one of the big 3, Ford, GM, or Chrysler. They're big companies. So there's a big, long, they don't just hire you like at McDonald's, right? Well, through this, I had to go through 4 or 5 phone interviews, right? You don't sit there, I don't know if you guys have jobs, but I'm sure when you guys worked at your job, you had to sit there, fill out an application, and they'd ask you some questions. Well, in this one, because it's a lot more than just, $13 an hour, they got a lot of questions. And one of the questions that they asked me was, it was on this paper that I had to fill out, was how much money do you currently make? Well, I knew that I was not making very much at my company. And I also knew that if I told Chrysler how much money I was making, Chrysler would look at it and go, well, shoot, we can offer this guy $1,000 more, and he'd have to take it because it will be better than what he was making then, right? Which, I know you guys are sitting there going, this is a stupid story, but listen. When you're married and you're in charge of taking care of your wife and you have a house payment and car payments and all this stuff, and you just know that if you start off at a good number, you get raises. Pete, you're probably aware of this, right? You get raises and everything goes up from there. If you start off way down here, you get those raises and stuff and you're still here, which is fine, but if you think you could be making this much, whatever, right? So I am sitting there, and I remember I was sitting in Lindsay and I's old house, and I was in this chair, and I was looking at Lindsay. She was on the floor, and I'm like, what do I say? And she goes, what do you mean, what do you say? Tell the truth. And I'm like, listen, if I tell the truth, they're not going to offer me very much. I should tell them I make more than that. That way they come with an offer even higher than that. And technically, I was supposed to be making more money anyway because it was like a commission thing. Anyway, so I struggled with that, which is so dumb. I'm embarrassed to say that I struggled with this lie for so long. But I was like, dude, this decision is setting Lindsay and I up for the rest of my career, assuming I keep working at Chrysler. I'm like, if I say this stupidly low number, they're going to not offer me very much money at all. And every 3% raise you get for inflation, right, whatever the case is, you get a promotion. It's all based off of this stupidly low number. And I'm like, we're not going to be able to have this or go on vacation or have kids or do all these things you dream about having someday. And I was so afraid of what I thought was going to happen that I never once thought, well, one, we shouldn't lie. That should have been, the 3-year-old answer. But I was also not once thinking of just have faith that God's going to make them give you a fair offer, right? I just assumed the worst 100%, which I do a lot. I think if you guys were at summer camp, I talked about selling our house, and there was a long inspection, and I was all right, that's it. They're not going to sell my house, and I'm going to have to live here until I die. But ultimately, I don't want to say it was me. It was definitely being afraid of my wife. I answered the question honestly, and I remember hitting send, and I was like, well, that sucks. I'm not going to get very much money. 3 days later, they called back, and they offered me, so much more money than I ever dreamt of. And I was like, oh, my gosh. Well, I guess that's what I get for, how did I have that much fear? And I was, wrecked for days over, do I lie or do I not lie? How stupid is that? But I didn't lie. I had faith, kind of. Lindsay had way more faith than I did. I had faith in my wife, let's say that. I'm not afraid of my wife. Back off. The point is, that faith that I had, or Lindsay had, in the Lord, that he was going to take us through this situation no matter what. And I assumed the worst 100% of the time in that situation. It was embarrassing for me, but it was eye-opening to see how the Lord took care of us through that situation. Super, super, super eye-opening. And ever since then, now I'm like, well, shoot, like I don't care if it's a bad situation or not. I'm going to tell the truth on that because I got faith that even though I might think it's the worst case, the Lord's going to take care of us. Doesn't matter what the situation is. There is a picture I want to show you guys. Hard right. Nick, can you show this picture? This was last week. This was last Friday, up in Iceland. Now, I don't know how many of you guys would do this, but I promise you there's a point. I promise. I don't know how many of you guys would do this, but this is 2 tectonic plates. So if you guys know what tectonic plates are from school, what causes earthquakes is shifts in the tectonic plates, right? Like you have these 2 things, they like shift together, and that's what causes earthquakes. And essentially, like it's like I think it's the mantle, the crust. I can't remember that much, but anyway. If you look on your right, this is the North American tectonic plate, and on your left is the Euro-Asia one. So essentially, that gap just goes straight down, and it's between 2 pieces of the outer crust of the earth, right? So you had a chance to go snorkeling in this, which a lot of people, one, wouldn't do it because they are terrified of like water where you can't see the bottom, which I will say gets in your head. Like you're sitting there floating going, dude, I don't know, Kraken could be down there. I have no idea. Like something crazy. You've seen the Jaws poster. Then the water's 36 degrees. That water was so cold. And so in order to go in this, you had to go, so prior to this picture being taken, we're in a parking lot. Again, it's like 49 degrees out and sunny. It's a really nice day out, but it's cold. And so you had to wear long johns, wool socks, and like a long john shirt, right? So you put all this stuff on, and then you go up to this van, and they're like, all right, they look at me, and they're like, here, this is your size. And it's this like thick, think of like a onesie. You guys were like long john underwear. So you like step into this thing, and you like zip the whole thing up, stick your arms out. And I'm like, okay, at this point, I feel kind of warm, but I'm not waterproof. So then they go, and they're like, all right, here's your wetsuits. And this wetsuit weighed like 100 pounds. I mean, it is like 7 mil or 9 millimeter thick neoprene, if you guys know what any of this means. Super, super heavy. And so they put it on, and they gave me a men's XL, which is fine. This shirt's an XL. I'm not that big. But they put this thing on me, and it took like 2 of these little Italian, both of the guys were like Italians. They were both like 5'2" and weighed like 100 pounds. And so I'm like standing there like this, and they're both like wrenching on this suit. Like there's these like silicone things go around your wrists, trying to put it on. They finally put it on. They can't zip my shoulders in. Finally, it takes 2 of them pulling this string thing to zip my shoulders in. And have you guys ever seen The Christmas Story? I'm the kid in the pink bunny suit. Like I'm standing there, I couldn't put my arms down, and I'm like, this is not gonna work. And they're like, yeah, that's not gonna work. You're just gonna lay there and do this in the cold water. So they got the thing off me, and they're like, all right, here we go. Here's a men's triple XL. I'm definitely not a triple XL, guys, but this thing was massive. So we get it on there, and the lady's trying to get my head through the silicone. She goes, do you work out your head too? And I was like, I feel attacked right now. Like, you're 100 pounds, whatever. So anyway, I get this thing on, and it looks like something goes around like a toilet seal. It's around your neck, but now it's a triple XL. So it fits my shoulders, but like I'm not 7'5". So I've got this massive like amount of fabric on my knees. The thing comes down to like here in my arms, and I'm sitting there, and I made this joke. I looked at my sister, and I was like, dude, this is what David felt like when David was getting ready to go fight Goliath. There's a verse in here where David is going to fight Goliath. You've got Goliath, right? We've already established he's this massive monster. No one wants to fight him. Everyone's too afraid. This guy's going to kill you. Why would you volunteer to go get murdered? That sounds like a dumb thing to do. Well, I think I'm going to read it to you because I want to. Because it's so good. David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Okay, that's a crazy thing to say for a teenager, right? Let's just stop there. How many of you guys would look at this massive monster that no one else in the army and all these warriors don't want to fight and be like, shoot, I got this? No, you would not. You're just lying again. No, you would not. All right, we'll have a slingshot competition later, and you're going to lose. All right. Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a boy, and he has been fighting man from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping your father's sheep. When a lion or bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him, bronze helmet, all this stuff. But again, Saul, full-grown man, now you got this kid. The suit doesn't fit. The suit that I put on didn't fit. It fit better than the first one, but it was too big, right? David's like, "Dude, I'm gonna die in this situation. I know I just gave you this awesome speech about how I kill lions and bears, but that was before I knew you were gonna put me in this oversized coat, right? Like this, I can't see anything on here." So he says, "I'm not doing any of that stuff. Just let me go get some stones." And he goes out, and you guys know how the rest of the story goes. Uses that slingshot, takes down Goliath, and all because he had faith in the Lord. He knew that the Lord was the one who got him out of the lions, got him out of the bears. He said, "This is nothing more than just a lion and a bear going after sheep. This time the sheep are my brothers and sisters here, the army, the Israelites, and I've got faith that the Lord is going to bring me through this exact situation again." And that's how all of us are supposed to be. All of us are supposed to have faith in the Lord. It doesn't matter how big you are. If you're an 11-year-old in here, whether you're an 18-year-old, whether you're 60, 65, 67, doesn't matter. All of us are supposed to have the exact same faith. Hey, shh. All of us are supposed to have the exact same faith in the Lord. David did not win against Goliath. He did not win against the lions. He did not win against the bear because he was some physical specimen who was strong enough to do it. No 15-year-old in their right mind could take out a lion, a bear, or Goliath separately, let alone all three of those in a lifetime. And yet, David did all of those because he had faith in the Lord. And I want you guys all to know, that's the one thing I want you guys to know. We all have those different fears that require different levels of faith. Whatever your fear is, whatever's holding you back, it's that faith in the Lord that's going to get us through that. We can't do it on our own. We can't do it on our own accord. We have to have the faith in the Lord. And we should all be striving, even at your age, to be the man or a woman after his own heart. All right, let's pray. Lord, I just thank you for this opportunity to get up here and talk to these kids. I just pray that all of them are honest with themselves, honest in their groups tonight about what their fears are. No need to be embarrassed about what your fear is. I just pray that they are honest with their leaders, honest with themselves, honest with you. You already know. You know what their fears are. There's no need to hide from you, Lord. I just pray that we recognize that we cannot overcome these fears without you. That we cannot move forward and get past these fears and what's holding us back without having complete faith and reliance on you, Lord. Just be with us now in our groups. In your name, amen.